Hey, Rudel here. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you're a subscriber. This is going to be a somewhat politically themed, not somewhat, completely politically themed video. So if you are in the dumb zone and you like to avoid what's happening in your country, you might want to go find a TikTok video. That being said, this video is about my feelings around the Kyle Rittenhouse event. And I have kind of a unique perspective that I haven't heard anyone else talking about. I want to share a little background about myself because I think that gives greater understanding. Not that I should have to validate my opinions based on my life experience, but I think it will make it easier for you or more palatable in this hyper PC culture that we're living in to listen to my words. Another thing I urge you is to listen to the end of this video before you interject with your opinions. I need for you to know that I don't need for you to agree with me. In America, we need to learn to debate and to apply critical thinking and to just listen to each other sometimes. That's what's going to make change. Not everyone agreeing with each other. That's dangerous. That being said, I grew up in a predominantly black neighborhood in Toledo, Ohio. We were working poor. My parents were alcoholics. My mother's Polish, from Polish immigrants. My father identifies as Native American. On the books, they have him as full-blooded, and our family name was on a list that goes back 200 years, an Indian roll that you didn't want to be on. Now it's cool to be Native American. Back then, you did not want to be on this list. A lot of people don't know that where my father was from, Upper Peninsula of Michigan, they literally, it was just like the South. They had signs on establishments that said no Indians, and there was, the hardcore violence and prejudice against the native people as they were trying to, take their land and control them from any kind of choices and possibly, taking back what was theirs. That being said, a lot of people look at me and go, "Oh, you look white." Well, Barack Obama looks black and was raised by a white woman, but he chooses to identify as black. So if the ex-president can identify with what he wants to, why don't I have the right to identify with the spirituality and the ethnic group that I really identify with? Again, people have to be careful of this double standard. Why is it only prejudice and bigotry when it is focused towards people of color? That's kind of what I'm seeing more and more in society right now, and I'm going to elaborate on this. So, growing up in a predominantly black neighborhood, during the summertime, I'd get really dark because of my genetics, and the black kids thought I was Mexican or Hispanic. And during the wintertime, of course, I was pale and I was white. But any time of the year, because I was the minority, I was a target. And along with the other handful of white kids in the neighborhood, a target of consistent violence. With just walking to and from school, anytime you left the house, you could be confronted with not just one or two, but gangs of kids, and, getting a beat down, teeth knocked out, things like this was a pretty common occurrence. And then I had a very beautiful younger sister, and I often had to, become a complete psycho animal to protect her. You would think that this experience, being the only white kid on the bus and being so abused and living in a war zone where there was constant violence and neighbors being murdered. Didn't happen in the news. This was like the old man who lived next 2 houses down that was like a grandfather for me, murdered for like $5 from some kids that lived just a couple blocks up. So this was, it was a war zone. It was horrific. And you would think that this would have made me hateful. It would have made me a bigot. But because I have a little bit higher than average intelligence, so my therapist tells me, I instead became acutely aware of what it was like to be a minority, an oppressed minority, an abused minority, to live in constant fear and to live in constant mistrust. Because that being said, of course, a lot of my closest friends and allies were also African American. And, you know, everything that I learned pretty much was from the African American community. So I have this deep identity, this connection more to the African American community than I actually do to the white community, just because of, you know, where I spent the first 20 years of my life. So the Kyle Rittenhouse deal. What people don't understand who judge the protesters, both violent and nonviolent, is that, you know, this is an American right. This is an American right and an American privilege. And if it is not exercised, and exercised with protection and safety, and I know you're going to say, well, what about the people that went all crazy? Well, we'll address that later. Right now, I just want to tell you that I am actually one of those people who have protested a lot over the years. And not just for my own interest, but the interests of others. I protested for Native American rights. I protested for gay rights. I protested for women's rights. I protested for things I can't even remember, environmental rights. And I never regretted putting my time and energy into going to those protests, making extra posters to share with other people, and rallying my friends to go do something valuable with their time and keep that right and privilege alive in the United States. And we always knew there was a possibility that we may go to jail, or we may experience some kind of violence from the opposing side. But it was worth for us being so young and idealistic, it was worth the threat to change things for the better. And I don't regret ever, at one protest I did, I don't regret it, because eventually the interest that I was backing was moved into a better position. It was changed, and there was a societal change for the better in support of that whatever it was, that topic. That being said, when this Kyle Rittenhouse thing went down, the first thing I thought is, wow, I had no idea that you could take a gun with you to a protest, and regardless, self-defense or not self-defense, that you could shoot and kill people. And I thought, Jesus Christ, it's a totally different age than when I was living in. I mean, we always knew there was a threat, but there was never that kind of threat. But then I started thinking even deeper about it. And what really disturbed me was, why wasn't there anything but a whisper in response to the two young men that were killed in that protest? Where was the Black Lives Matter people, both of color and not of color, to stand up and protest, and if need be, turn the streets upside down to get justice for those two young men that martyred themselves at that event? So when I saw people being interviewed, it was often people of color, and they were just talking about themselves. Oh, I don't feel safe. I don't this. Well, fuck you. What about the two boys that died? Where's goddamn Al Sharpton and the rest of the gang standing up there with those boys' parents, getting justice for them? So this is where I am seeing two things. The first thing I'm seeing is a double standard. And, you know, when they had that whole all lives matter thing, I thought, oh, yeah, that's a bunch of bullshit. But now I'm thinking, damn, maybe all lives don't matter, if you know what I mean. You know, you can't You can't allow your allies to be murdered. So, that being said, not only did I think it was extremely disappointing, and I really want you kids, you idealistic kids, to know that in theory, protesting and supporting the Black Lives Matter is great, but I want you to take note of this event. Because these heroes are going to be not only, they're not going to be made into t-shirts and billboards and, no streets will be lit on fire until justice is had. They're just going to be forgotten. And so will you. So be careful where and when you decide to be a hero. Number two, I want to point out that the years that I was actively protesting, one of the things in my own self-interest that I was protesting was gay rights. And the one community at that point that, even though, proportionately, there's as many of people of color, of people of non-color that are homosexuals, back 15, 20 years ago, many more of them were so frightened both by, the African American experience and the fact that their families would ostracize them, that the one community that not only never had our backs, but often voted in mass against our rights and best interest was the Black community, because of both the Christian and Muslim brainwashing in regards to what their texts say about homosexuality. So I'm seeing this interesting, reoccurring theme here, this reoccurring theme about support us, but when it comes time to give a reach around, there's this complete abandonment. So I'm going to take it to the next level about this double standard, and that is appropriation. Appropriation. I understand being Native American. When I see some white woman on Halloween wearing a war bonnet, that is offensive to me because that's regalia. It would be like if I mocked a priest or mocked a military person. I think that is appropriation. But I recently read this article about this young model. She's kind of one of those social media it girls. She was voted the most beautiful girl when she was 6 years old, something crazy like that. And so for Halloween, she wanted to be one of the characters from Orange is the New Black. She did cornrows, did the whole prison drag, tattoos, and people were so offended. They just jumped her shit because she was appropriating. So when did African Americans invent braids? I mean, seriously, maybe the style, but I have a feeling that was done in a lot of cultures, including the Viking cultures. And if we're going to be consistent, if it was appropriation and offensive, why can Doja Cat appropriate blonde hair and look like Marilyn Monroe, and that's not appropriation, but because a white person is doing it, it's appropriation? And I'm not saying it's right or wrong either way. I'm just saying that I want consistency. I don't think you can get stability in a society if you don't have consistency. And what I'm seeing a lot with more and more of this repression of thought, opinion, and self-expression, it feels more communist than a democracy. And that is very dangerous. We can't have a double standard. We have to have a really concise understanding of what these things are, or no one's ever going to be able to have the freedoms to really exercise the democracy that is idealized in the American dream. I think I'm going to leave it at that. I just want you to marinate that, and please leave your thought-provoking, intelligent comments below. If they're rude, ignorant, or just lack any type of intelligence, you'll be easily removed. So save your energy. And again, I don't need to be supported. I don't need for you to agree with this. It's really just to get people thinking. It's to get people thinking, and a warning. It's a warning to society, because I'm seeing some swings of the pendulum that are not going to be effective. They're not going to be effective. There's going to be retributions. Okay, take care of yourselves and take care of each other, because I believe how we treat each other in the streets is our ultimate reality. Bye for now.